Hello, BookTube. Well, believe it or not, it's the end of June, and that's time for July TBR. It doesn't seem possible to me, and I would probably have let my TBR for July slide just a bit in my absent-minded way, except that this morning's BookTube feed was entirely full of July TBR videos, including two by two of my favorite booktubers. One doesn't like to play favorites, but nevertheless, Sarah at Steeped in Books made a July TBR, and so did Olive at A Book Olive. Now, I am currently very angry at Sarah and Olive because the raging pandemic in America has made it impossible for me to legitimately nag them to come and visit me again. And you might ask, well, but Steve, why would you be angry at them over that? Shouldn't you be angry at the pandemic? To which I say, zip it. I'm angry at them because they won't come and visit me. It's the way with old people. You just have to live with it. But their videos gave me FOMO of a massive order, so I've decided to make a July TBR of my own. I'll give you 10 books here that are either books that I haven't read, but have, or books that I don't even have yet, or books that I have read and intend to reread in the month of July. And they span the spectrum, but some of them I think we will probably have seen before on this channel, probably partially because I may have been reading ahead, but probably more likely because their publication date changed. And I was looking forward to them as May or June books, and they became July books. One way or another. We'll go through them and we'll just talk about them a bit. The first one, I think the first couple, are romance novels. Sarah at Steeped in Books concentrates on romance novels, and my oh my, her July list was amazing. It's a very, there were some common themes throughout. Of course, one of Sarah's themes is modern-day steamy cowboy romances. But another theme I noticed on her July TBR was summery books. Adirondack chairs, at some body of water, beach umbrellas, that sort of thing. She's heavy into the summer reading this time around, and a lot of them looked so good. Oh my, one of them, Mary Kay Andrews' Hello Summer, is something I've already read and just loved. And she also amazed me by picking out Barbara Linsky's new book, At the Beach, I think, something like that. I forget the name of the thing. I read it, but I forget the title. The title's rather forgettable. But that wasn't the amazing thing, because her video is full of summer choices. The amazing thing was she said this, the foremost romance reader on BookTube, said she's never read a Barbara Linsky novel. Barbara Linsky has written, I think, 750,000 romance novels. And Sarah somehow managed not to read any of them. I hope that this first impression is good. I can't imagine that. But I want to start with a couple of romances too, and just for variety's sake, these are things that appeal to me that I don't think were in Sarah's video. Just in case you watch the two of them. I'll leave a link to Sarah and Olive so that you know who I'm talking about. The first one is Kristen Proby. This is After All. We're on the mini-me here, but I think the lighting is okay. Is the lighting going to get worse or better if I... Oh, see, look at that. No, it's much worse. So, and I think I understand that. I had a number of tutorials being given to me in emails. People saying, no, the more light that you have blasting onto the screen that's going to make things worse. You want, or no, more light is better. I don't know one way or another. But this author has been doing a series of romance novels. We talked yesterday about how the appeal of romance novels in series. And this is one of them. These are romance novels that all take place in Manhattan and thereabouts. Manhattan is wonderfully evoked, and all of its environs are wonderfully evoked in this series. And I think this is the last one. I think this is the last one in the series, and that's a terrible shame. I will follow this author anywhere now. I've loved every one of these novels. I haven't read After All yet, but I'm sure that it will be the same thing, that it will be snappy characters. Not the secondary characters tend to be one-dimensional. The main characters not at all. And the pacing and the environment especially, I love the whole series, so I'm sorry to see it come to an end. Be interested to see what she does next. Then the next one is also in a series. This is book 2 in the Women Who Dare series. I read the first one and sang its praises on this channel to you, I think last year. This is the great Beverly Jenkins. If you have ever been to, those of you who have, I don't think many of you have been. Probably even Sarah hasn't been. Any of you have ever been to a romance writers convention back when they existed, pre-pandemic. If you've ever had the pleasure of meeting Beverly Jenkins, she is fantastic. And her romances are not to be missed. And the first book in the Women Who Dare series was called Rebel, and it was amazingly good, even by this author's standards. And now we have a second book. This is Wild Rain. This is the second book in the Women Who Dare series. which are historical, which just goes to show you the amount of research and the amount of obstacles that this author is intentionally putting in her own path to write historical romance novels about. Usually, Beverly Jenkins writes about black characters, and therefore has to find spaces in history to tell these stories. That's I shouldn't stress that, because by far the best element of these books is the personality of the lead women. That's the where Beverly Jenkins really excels. I mean, her men are extremely steamy romance heroes, but extremely broody, steamy romance heroes. But her women are amazing. The main women, especially the main character in each of these books. So, of course, I'm looking forward to reading this, because the first one was so good. Then the next one is a big fantasy anthology, one of two on this list. This is a perennial theme for a fantasy anthology. This is edited by Jonathan Strahan, and it's the Book of Dragons, with a whole table of contents of contemporary fantasy writers, some of whom I know, some of whom I don't know, all writing stories around dragons. This is a very popular theme for fantasy anthologies. I have read books. I've actually read fantasy anthologies called The Book of Dragons or A Book of Dragons, just that exact title, probably a dozen times. And lots of other dragon-themed anthologies, like Dragon World was one that sold surprisingly well about 30, 40, 50 years ago. I've read these things many times, but I never get enough of them, because it's an infinite variety. And infinite questions that you have no matter what. So dragons are always interesting for me. I'm not a dragon nut in the fantasy world, but they've always interested me, even from Tolkien. You know, I always wonder the inevitable hypothetical: what would the War of the Ring have been like if there had been dragons in the world? Smaug from The Hobbit is killed before the War of the Ring gears up, and there don't appear to be any other dragons in the world. But what would it have been like? They don't seem to have any particular adherence to Sauron, and they're intelligent, they're sentient beings, and they're incredibly powerful. They're A-bombs as far as power levels go on Middle-earth. What could the Nazgul, even on winged mounts, do against Smaug, for instance, who we're not even given to believe is a particularly powerful dragon? I love thinking about that. I love thinking along those lines, especially since when you read in the Silmarillion, you get a better glimpse of what Tolkien's dragons are like. But it goes on from there. I mean, you can go all the way back to Beowulf. So the subject is endlessly fascinating. So I'll take any anthology. And the next one is a big work of history. This is the Yale English Monarch series, and this is David Carpenter writing on Henry III. This is can you make that out there? 1207 to 1258, which is the length of Henry's reign before. That was his personal rule as king before he was deposed. He went on to live, and I guess Carpenter is going to do two parts. This is going to be the first two-part biography in the Yale English Monarch series. I guess there's going to be a second part about Henry after his kingship. I'm on board either way, absolutely on board. I haven't read this, but I don't have currently in my extensive English monarch biography section, I don't have a life of Henry III. So that'll be fantastic. Another biography, one of a few on this channel, on this TBR. I love biographies, so what can I say? Is R.B. Bernstein's book, The Education of John Adams. Title is obviously a play on The Education of Henry Adams by Henry Adams. I've already read this. I liked it very much. I will be rereading. I'll be rereading it in July. Preparatory to writing about it. It comes out, I believe the date on it is July the 1st, and I don't think that date has changed. So I think that's when it will be in bookstores if you're interested in it. Then this next one is a terrific nonfiction writer, terrific modern nonfiction writer, usually deals with modern politics, but does so in a smart way. And this is, it's Robert Draper, and it's How to Start a War. How the Bush administration took America to war in Iraq. Some of you are very young, and for you, that is settled history. For some of you watching this channel in America have grown up in a country that has been at war the whole of your life. And so this will just be a part of the history books to you, but quite a few of you remember this happening. Legislation being pushed through the Senate literally in the dead of night. some of you, quite a few of you, remember being utterly outraged by this thing that was open-ended. I remember thinking that when Bush was speaking in front of the United Nations, when he was speaking in front of the Senate, saying, we're not going to war with a state. We're going to war with an idea. We're going to war with terrorism. I remember saying to the TV, well, you're never going to get rid of an idea. What you are literally describing is that you intend to go to war forever. This is a war you intend to be open-ended. And unlike other wars where maybe their perpetrators thought that, you're outright saying it. And I have read many, many books on the start of the Iraq War and many, many books on the conduct of the Iraq War. Bob Woodward, for instance. But Draper is great. No matter what, I want to read him, and I'm sure that he will have some insights, draw some dots, lines between dots that I will not have done in all this time thinking about this subject, so I'm all for it. Then the next one is Colin Dickey. This is The Unidentified. This is a book of his. The subtitle is Mythical Monsters, Alien Encounters, and Our Obsession with the Unexplained. And a little parenthetical word of warning to some of you. I was, of course, I was lining up these pictures of these covers so that I could show my imaginary booktube friends what I was talking about, because this channel has nothing in the way of graphics at all. You just stare at my bulbous nose the whole time. A word of advice to some of you, if you are looking up covers on the Google image search, be sure to type in the whole of this, because if you type in The Unidentified and then you begin to type in this author's last name and you don't quite finish, Google autofinish is going to give you some pictures you don't want to see, okay? Just a little report from the field there. This is right up my alley, of course. I am utterly fascinated by humanity's fascination with these kinds of things. I get the impression from the advance word on this book that the author does not stake a claim at all. He's just examining the phenomenon of why we see forms in the woods, why we see alien vessels in the sky, all that sort of thing. I'm always up for books like this. So, and the next one is by Abby Cushman. It's a children's picture book. It's called Soaked. And it is the story of a very, very wet bear. And the animals that he's not so much friends with them, but some of them like being in the rain. One of them has a very flimsy umbrella. Some of them want to be friends, and he is determined not to cheer up because he's soaked to the skin. And I'd be willing to bet in the course of this book, I love children's picture books, I dote over them. I'd be willing to bet that he changes his mind. I'd be willing to bet by the end of the book, he maybe even cracks a smile. I'll be all for it. I think that the point of the book, aside from pleasing adults, is to teach kids the value of not obsessing on a bad mood. Go with a bad situation, maybe you can enjoy it a bit. Always a good lesson to teach children, because they get obsessed in their own sulks. And the sooner they get out of that habit, the better. Just as a side note here, I want to point out that in reality, a wet bear is not long-suffering and cuddly and may be coerced into a smile. In reality, a wet bear is even more likely to rip the skin off your face than a dry bear is. But you saw that coming, didn't you? Then this next one's an oldie. One of the couple of oldies on this channel. And you can blame Olive for it, because Olive, on her video, again, I'll leave a link to her video for her July TBR. She mentions that she is going to read Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. I got the impression for her video that this might be the first time that she's reading it. And the minute I saw that, I thought, oh my God, it's been so long. I love Jules Verne, absolutely love him. I thought, it's been so long since you read Journey to the Center of the Earth. You should. And I thought, in connection with yesterday's video, I showed you The Deerslayer by James Fenimore Cooper in the Scribner's Illustrated Classic Edition with illustrations by A.C. Wyeth. And I said that I wanted all of Fenimore Cooper's Deerslayer stories in the Wyeth illustrated volumes. And several of you emailed me and said that he did the Pathfinder, he did The Last of the Mohicans, and he did the Deerslayer, but that he didn't do any of the others. That, in other words, Scribner doesn't have a complete set of the Deerslayer stories by James Fenimore Cooper, illustrated by Wyeth. To which I wanted to respond with a line from that modern cinematic masterpiece, The Wiz. And the line would be from my favorite musical number in that show, Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News. Okay? Because I wake up already negative, and I'm buying up my fuse. So don't nobody bring me no bad news. I will tentatively agree that perhaps you people are right in raining on my parade and that the Scrivener does not do complete Natty Bumppo stories. Okay, fine. But my first thought when I saw Olive talking about Journey to the Center of the Earth was, okay, well, I definitely want the Scrivener's illustrated Journey to the Center of the Earth, illustrated by A.C. Wyeth. I definitely want that. I know they do Miles Strogoff by Verne when nobody reads that book anymore. I know they do, The Mysterious Island by Verne. So they must do 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and they must do Journey to the Center of the Earth. And a preliminary examination on YouTube and Google tells me that I might be wrong about that. So my beef might be with Wyeth, not with any of you. One way or another, I still want to read Journey to the Center of the Earth, so I picked a cover offline. One cute cover offline. I'd like to read an illustrated version, so I don't know what I'll do. I will look around and see what I have. I believe I have the Penguin Classic Edition. I wouldn't know. We won't know anytime soon because we've got 100 million Russians to go through, but I think I have the Penguin Classic Edition of Journey to the Center of the Earth. But I want a nice illustrated hardcover if I can get one as well. So I will look around and see. But I'm all for it. I'm all for rereading it anyway. All I needed was a slight nudge from one of our greatest booktubers. This next one is something that I mentioned in connection with Jason's channel, Old Blues Chapter and Verse, where he was Voxering me, as the kids do. You are welcome to Voxer me. He was Voxering me about having discovered the Lord Hawke espionage novels of Ted Bell. And what a hoot they are, and I agree completely. They are incredibly high octane. Not necessarily Evelyn Waugh in terms of literary quality, but boy oh boy, page turners par excellence. And there's a new one coming out that I'm going to get to in July. It's Dragonfire. And in this book, Alex Hawke, he's a lord of the realm, he's highly trusted by the royal family, and he's contacted by the Queen. There are many. She has whole intelligence agencies, and she has heavy sway at Interpol and with the United States, but it doesn't matter. She calls up Alex when she needs a favor, and in this case, one of her grandsons appears to have been abducted. And one would like to know if Alex Hawke would look into it for one. So he does, and that's what this story is. And if that outline strikes you as a little bit, I don't know, brainless, yes. Okay, fine. You won't stop reading, though. The next one is another royal biography. This is one we've seen on this channel many times. It got bumped to July. I've already read it. I'm going to read it again with a great deal of attention. Repulsion, but also attention in July. This is Nicola Tallis. I believe I've written a review of everything that this author has ever written. She just goes from book to book that interests me. Quite good. She's usually quite good. This is Uncrowned Queen, a biography of Margaret Beaufort, the mother of King Henry VII, who went on to found the Tudor dynasty. Margaret Beaufort is similar to many late medieval highborn women in that she married early, divorced early, had a child early, was widowed early. The only difference between her and other late medieval highborn women who experienced all of those things is that Margaret Beaufort experienced all of those things when she was 11. And as such, was completely insane for all of her life, and not human at all. No human interaction, no human connections whatsoever. A totally repulsive and deeply unsettling figure in history who went on, I believe she's alive today, she went on forever and ever, manipulating everything behind the scenes. But the point to remember about her is that she was a complete psychopath. She was completely traumatized out of anything resembling normal humanity long before she hit puberty. So there's no way to reclaim her, and Nicola Tallis, is, to her credit, is not entirely trying to, not reclaim her as a person. In this book, she's mainly trying to reclaim her as an incredible force of nature behind a lot of the big historical events of her time, and that is entirely true. So this is going to be eye-opening, especially to, I know there are quite a few of you who are very interested in the Tudor dynasty. This is going to be eye-opening to those of you who have not paid sufficient attention to Margaret Beaufort, because it's not an overstated claim to say that the Tudor dynasty probably wouldn't have happened without her. That's an amazing thing. It's par for the course. A lot of women in this period of history especially had a massive amount of power, but of course they had no official standing. They couldn't even technically be their own legal guardians. technically speaking, Margaret Beaufort was pretty much always the ward of some other man in her life, including her teenage son. Even though every man in her life, and I mean every one of them, including battle-hardened warlords who hacked people's heads off with one swing on the battlefield, every man in her life was terrified of her. Even though that was true, technically speaking. You're going to love it. I recommend this author anyway, but this book you're going to love. I'm going to give it another thorough reread. And then we go to another oldie. An oldie that I could maybe make a case for rereading, Journey to the Center of the Earth, because I haven't read it anywhere. I've read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, perhaps 1,000 times, but I haven't read Journey to the Center of the Earth anywhere near that many times, so I can maybe make a case for devoting the time, and also egregiously devoting a little time to hunting for a pretty edition, online or even in the bookstore. Totally do not need an edition of Journey to the Center of the Earth, but I'm going to do it anyway. But the next oldie on our list is connected with a BookTube event, one of 80 million BookTube events happening in July. July is Jane Austen in July, which is hosted by Katie at Books and Things and is a celebration of all things Jane Austen. And there is, I will leave a link to her video introducing this year's iteration and all of the prompts. Prompts are wonderful. They're very simple. They're very easy to do. And the first one of them is to read a Jane Austen book. And that's all I need. That's all I need to do. And I know a lot of you out there are probably right now saying, so you're going to reread Persuasion, right? Because you seem to ding it a little when you were talking about Jane Austen in the Daily Penguin. Nope. Nope. I'm going to reread Pride and Prejudice. I need no prompting whatsoever to reread Pride and Prejudice. I'm going to do it anyway. It's a free country so far. I can read Pride and Prejudice again if I want. That's going to be the Jane Austen that I read for Jane Austen in July. I will do a bunch of the others. In fact, maybe I should make a video and talk a little about all the other prompts. That'd be a lot of fun. But this is the Jane Austen book that I'm going to read in July. Now, there are others. You're supposed to read something of hers that's not fiction. So I'll probably reread the letters. I have a collection of the letters. And you're supposed to read an adaptation. There's no rule, I think, about rereading, so I'll probably reread an adaptation. And a book by one of her contemporaries, that sort of thing. Wonderful prompts, a wonderful event, as always. Those videos are going to be so much fun to watch. But I know some of you, especially perhaps a certain manatee in real life, are saying, but you've read Pride and Prejudice 1,000 times. Why read it again? Why not read a Jane Austen novel that you haven't read 1,000 times? To which I say, zip it. Okay. I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice again, and I'm going to love it again. Then this next one is also part of a reading event, an ongoing reading event. Those of you who are participating will already have your soulless 1,000-mile stare look that accompanies this particular read-along. This is Stormalong 2020. We're a group of booktubers who started out nice and cheerful. We'll see what they look like in October. They've started out, they want to do a read-along of Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives. The first 3 volumes, which is, I think, 472 million pages, leading up to the release of Rhythm of War in November, the 4th book in the series. So for June and July, we are reading The Way of Kings. And I am intentionally sticking to that routine. I've read this book a couple of times, and I am reading. I've never read it in this kind of spirited company. That makes all the difference in the world. So I am watching all of their videos, geeky as they are. I should give you a geek warning. I know this is BookTube, so the geek warnings have to be very high on the scale. This is geeky even for BookTube, but the goal here is to make it unintimidating. So you, with lots of conversation, live streams, lots of fun involvement with people who know this book and don't, we are reading The Way of Kings for June and July. So I am going to read the second half of this book in July. I've made a point of stopping. I've made a point of not reading the whole thing. And the next one is a novel. It comes out of the blue. I'm not a huge fan of contemporary fiction, but this is vaguely historical. It takes place in, I think, the mid-20th century in Atlantic City. And I don't know that it would have jumped out on my radar of all the contemporary fiction that's out there, except that I know a lot of book critics, and I know a lot of people who ought to be book critics but aren't, a lot of people who read a lot and are really good at reading, really good at talking about the books that they're reading, the strengths and weaknesses, in a very approachable way to others. One could mention a certain Mrs. D, who's really good at that and never does it. But one way or another. I know lots of people who either do that and then write reviews, or do that and just talk about it, and I'm lucky enough to talk about it with them. And a lot of those people have been mentioning this book without knowing each other. That is gold to me. That is gold. When that happens, that book moves way up on my list of things to read. And that's happened with this book. This is by Rachel Beanland, and it's Florence Adler, Swims Forever. And it's a historical novel. It's a very bright cover. I don't know if we're going to be able to do much more than that with it. It's a very bright cover. It's a novel set in Atlantic City, in a very crowded apartment in Atlantic City, and the title character goes out for a swim and never comes back. And for the sketchy amount that I know of the plot is that some of the main characters in the book decide to lie about that fact to the children involved, and say that she's just swimming forever, that she's not dead. I don't know much more about it than that. I confess I have this book. I have a reader's copy of it, but it was low on my priority list. I wasn't reading up on it or hearing anything about it until I started hearing friends of mine who also are reviewers, who also read ahead, saying, boy, I read a lot of advanced copies, but the one that sticks with me is Florence Adler Swims Forever. I keep remembering it. Good enough for me. So I'll be reading that in July. And then our last book is another anthology. It's another fantasy anthology, one we've seen on this channel before. I read a little bit of it, but then its date got bumped, so I'm going to read it again. This time I'm going to read it in a way that big fantasy anthologies don't ask you to read them. I'm going to read it in sequence from the first page to the end. It's like 1,000 pages long. It's by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. We've seen it already. It's the Big Book of Modern Fantasy. A big fantastic thing in the Big Book series that covers all sorts of authors, including quite a few who I've never read before. So, even more so than the Book of Dragons, this will be an anthology experience that I'm sure will teach me a lot. One of the best things that I love about reading anthology series like this, or the Book of Dragons, is the chance that I will get new authors out of it. That I will get authors who are either long dead, whose works I don't know, or who are alive and whose works I can follow. That would be great. I rely on other dyed-in-the-wool readers to give me recommendations like that. And the Vandermeers are really good at this sort of thing. Their book on weird fantasy was terrific. Weird fantasy is not my cup of tea at all, but I loved that anthology. Just loved it. And their Big Book of Science Fiction, boy, has that anthology grown on me the more I go back to it. Boy, oh boy, has it ever. These two are a perfect example of what I talk about with anthologies. Some anthologists will just pick and pick and pick, to cover their bases. Others have a vision. As poncy as that sounds, they have a vision of what they want the book to be. They want the book to be a reading experience, not just a collection of reading experiences, if I'm making any sense there. And these two seem to want to do that with their anthologies. So I've dipped in here and there with this thing, but now I'm going to read the whole thing in July. And I think that's it on the mini-me. Yes, it is. That's it. That is my July 2020 TBR. That is not all that I will be reading in July, of course. I'm planning on easily breaking triple digits in July, unless I get massively distracted. What if there's a massive heat wave, a really crippling thing? Not a few high 80-degree Fahrenheit days, but a really crippling heat wave. It could happen. It's happened all over the world in many, many places. That might throw me off my game. Also, large parts of the United States are surging in coronavirus cases. Surging. There's no absolute guarantee that won't rebound and happen again in Massachusetts. That could throw me off my game as well. I don't see how, because I'm getting these books electronically and I'm reading at home anyway. But I'm counting on reading a lot more than these 10 books in July. A lot more, 190 more books. But a lot of them wouldn't be of any interest to you. I read a book every day, for instance, for Kirkus Reviews. They're all indie titles, but not many of them are worth talking about. There'll be quite a few rereads. There'll be quite a few new books that won't be of much interest to a general public, I would think, if they end up being so. Like there's a critical natural history of wolves on Isle Royale in Michigan, I believe. There's a new book that looks to be fairly technical on the history and the upkeep of open source software. Stuff like Ubuntu, how these things exist in an increasingly proprietary world. I'm not sure how much interest that will be to the general reader. I will eat that up. There are a bunch of titles on similarly abstruse subjects. So but lumping all of that in, plus tons and tons of romance, tons of science fiction and mystery, tons of series stuff, tons of new releases to make my July total. So this TBR is not complete, but did you hear that? Somebody has woken up. Baby, you've woken up. You got up on the bed. Oh my God, what are you doing? All right, well, those of you who are newcomers, that's my little dog. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That was my July TBR. I will try to link the videos that I've mentioned down below. If you do not subscribe to Katie at Books and Things, of course, first of all, but also to Sarah at Steeped in Books or Olive at A Book Olive, then you absolutely should. And in 2 of those 3 cases, Olive, of course, is the queen over us all. So she reads everything. Katie concentrates on her channel on Victorian stuff, large amounts of Victorian stuff. And Sarah concentrates on romances, large amounts of romances. You can find non-specialty stuff on either of their channels. But my point is, don't look at the specialty and think, oh, well, I'm not interested in specialty, so I won't be interested in the channel. That is not how this works. That is not how things happen in our little corner of BookTube. Our little corner of BookTube is about people. People talking to you about what interests them. And trust me, you will like hearing these people talk to you about what interests them, even if it doesn't interest you. So I will try to leave all the links down below, and I'm looking forward, all the books on this list that I haven't read, I'm looking forward to them. But in a perverse and nerdy way, I'm also extremely looking forward to the books on this list that I have read. I'm looking forward to rereading them, because I've got it bad. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.